Hello, I'm a junior in high school at the moment, and just like my fellow classmates earlier this semester, I had to choose my classes for next year. Here at Lakeside, I take two core class APs, AP Lang and AP US History, and an elective AP, AP European History. And the last two core classes I take are General Physics and General Algebra 2. This is because I'm extremely bad at math, but I'm a bit of an oddity because of my blended level of classes. What I mean is that the way that it works in my school, you're either expected to take all general classes with the exception of maybe one accelerated, or you'll take a full load of APs and the rest being gifted. Now, this option looks pretty and perfectly consistent when written on a transcript, but personally it doesn't make any sense to me. People here force themselves to take AP and gifted classes, even though they will struggle unnecessarily when they just take an accelerated or a general class. Not all, but most of these students are white, and when I've asked them, why are you doing this to yourself? You can't take so many APs. Here are some of the answers that I've received. I have to, it's what's expected of me. Or, I want to get into a really good college. Not too surprising. But then I more commonly get these answers. I don't hang with people in those types of classes, general classes. I've even heard, I don't want to be in the ghetto classes with all the black and Mexican kids. Or worse, I don't want to be in the retarded classes. That last person was referring to an accelerated class, by the way. I've also asked the other side of the spectrum, the students who excel but remain in general classes even though they can benefit exponentially from AP. Not all, but most of these students are not white, minorities. And when I've asked them, why are you staying in these classes, move up the level, here are their expected answers. I've never been offered, or I'd rather take the easy A, even my friends are in these classes. Not too shocking. But then I more commonly will get these answers. I don't take white classes. I don't fit in the white classes. Nah, that's a white class. Students are placed in classes by random chance. We're placed in our classes by the method of tracking. Tracking is a system in America and in other countries where the entire school's population is assigned to classes based on the student's overall achievement, whether that being above average, below average, or normal. Students are tested as young as first grade with the expectation of them remaining in that class level for the rest of their academic careers. And tracking has also been proven to increase the achievement gap. In 2016, nationally, only 19% of Hispanic students took an AP course. Well, that number for black students was 15%. But 58% of those students were white. Nationally, AP classes are disproportionately full of large numbers of white students and strikingly small numbers of Hispanic and black students. The racial achievement gap isn't something new. This has been an issue since the 1960s when schools first became desegregated here in America. That is also around the same time that tracking began in America. This issue isn't just nationwide, it's local too. It's heavily prevalent within my own school. Back in February during my school's Black History program, there was something that was repeated almost constantly. It was that my school that opened back in 1964 first didn't allow any students of color and now has such great diversity. And yes, the diversity is great, it's amazing, but is it really all that great when it feels like we're segregated within our own walls? I'm tired of hearing about the diversity, but only seeing it when I walk through the hallways and not in the classrooms. Granted, it's not like teachers are rounding us up by race and going, white kid, you take AP Physics, black kid, you stay in general math. We're doing this to ourselves. We are segregating ourselves. I'm here to ask you to not only question the education system, but to question ourselves. Why is this happening? Why does AP and gifted classes automatically constitute as a white class? Why have I never seen an all-minority gifted class or an all-white general class? When you walk down the halls of my high school, you can look inside of a classroom and tell whether it's a higher level or lower level class based on the racial makeup of the classroom. Leah, a white junior at my high school, states, "My higher level classes are all white people with maybe 2 people of color." That's pretty shocking since the racial distribution of my high school is pretty even, actually. With an over 2,000 student population, my school is divided by 34% white, 28% Hispanic, 29% black, and the rest being 10%. That is a reported total 64% minority enrollment. So why are there only white kids in the AP and gifted classes? 22% of students in my school are in the gifted program. 42% of those students are white, but only 9% are black and 5% are Hispanic. For example, when you're choosing your classes for junior year, you either choose between the higher level math class, calculus, or the lower level math class, algebra 2. 10% of students at my high school take algebra 2. That number being 28% of the Black and Hispanic population and only 3% of the white. Now let's compare to the 9% of students that take calculus. 10% are white, 3% are Hispanic, and only 1% are Black. But let me play devil's advocate here. Why does it matter? My school has a higher level of white students than minority students, so it makes perfect sense that there's going to be more white kids in the AP and gifted classes. I'm making mountains out of molehills. But am I? Yes, it's understandable to have more white students in the class, and yes, it's bound to happen, but why is this the norm? 33% of students at my school are in the AP program. 18% of those students are Black, 15% are Hispanic, but 51% are white. My school offers more than 23 different AP courses and a multitude of gifted and accelerated classes, so it makes no sense for the lack of diversity in these classes. So what's stopping them? I went out and investigated why. I interviewed 50 students, 25 white, 25 minority, with a series of questions to investigate why this racial divide happens. The answers I received gave me a closer look at the achievement gap, not just at Lakeside, but nationally. I'm not going to go through every question I asked, but just a few that I found very important. I began each interview with the question, have you ever taken an AP and/or gifted class? To give you a perspective on the data I collected, only 1 out of 25 of the white students I interviewed had not taken an AP class, but all of them were enrolled in the gifted program. And only 9 out of 25 of the minority students I interviewed had not taken an AP class, but only 4 of them in total were in the gifted program. The other question I want to focus on that I found had very surprising answers from one group than another was, what would you say the racial makeup of the classroom is, depending on general to AP? I am not exaggerating when I say all 25 of the minority students categorized the 4 class levels as AP classes are mostly white people, with maybe 1 Black person. Jeffrey, a biracial sophomore, stated. Michelle, a Hispanic junior, recounts how gifted is mostly white people, like AP. And Leslie, another Hispanic junior, states that general and accelerated classes are always super diverse, with maybe 2 white people. It's like the opposite of gifted and accelerated classes. All the minorities' answers aligned with these 4 people's statements. According to the Department of Education, the only students who are taking AP classes and passing them are either disproportionately affluent, white, and/or Asian. I mean, 35% of Black and Hispanic students make up high schoolers in America, but only 27% of them are taking AP classes, and only 18% of them are passing them. All of the minorities I interviewed recognized the racial disparities in the classrooms. Many of them have told me what it's like to walk into a classroom on the first day of school and realize that you're the only person of color in that room. Isabella, a Black junior at my high school, told me, it feels like there is a sign on your forehead in big red letters labeling you as the Black kid. For me, it becomes a fun game of find a minority whenever I walk into a new classroom. You should play it. It's kind of like playing Where's Waldo. Playing this little game actually led me to getting the idea for this TED Talk. Like I mentioned earlier, I take AP Lang, and there are only 2 class periods of this subject. I'm in the second period class, and this class is pretty diverse, a few minorities, a majority white, and one day I left my binder in this class, and I had to go retrieve it during third period, which also happens to be the second AP Lang class. My school's reported average class size is 18-1. I walked into a classroom of 17 white students and 1 Black student. To this day, this completely baffles me. The answers from the other half of the white people's interviews also baffled me. I asked them the racial makeup question, and only 6 out of 25 of them had agreed with the minority student statements. The people I'm about to mention asked to remain anonymous, so I will not be using their names, but I will be using their statements. I believe that my AP classes are all very diverse, because there were like 4 Black kids in my AP World class, stated a sophomore. I believe you're making this a bigger issue than it actually is, because my microeconomics class has like 6 Mexican kids in it. We're called a senior. All my classes are very diverse, and I take all gifted in an AP, especially my AP classes, stated a junior. The junior who answered that last question is in that 3rd period AP Lang class. All of the minority students recognized the racial divide, and seemingly the white students were oblivious to it. It makes me wonder, kind of fearfully, if students aren't recognizing the problem, are teachers not recognizing it either? The last question I want to focus on is one that I find to be the most important and one that I believe will lead us to a possible solution to this issue. How does the teacher respond to the class based on the class's level? All of the students taking AP and Gifted collectively agreed that their teachers were very responsive, very good, eager to help, very understanding. They were all generally revered as great teachers. But when I've asked students, no matter what race, but hey, you know we're talking about minorities here, how does a general to accelerated class teachers behave to the class? Their answers are strikingly different. They're not as passionate as teachers who teach higher level classes. They're more likely to snap on a student and send a student out with very little warning. They always seem to come in defeated. They give up on us and make us believe that we just cannot learn. For a long time, I did not like school. The thought of dropping out has crossed my mind many, many times before. This all began when a math teacher gave up on me so much to the point that they stopped handing me work and I eventually failed that class. When someone gives up on you, your options feel like they become limited. When someone makes you feel like you cannot learn, you just give up. But I didn't give up. I began working harder. My parents got me the tutoring that I desperately needed, and now I know that I will always have a resource for help if I ever need it. So what about the students whose only resource of outside help is a teacher and not a tutor or a parent? General classes are statistically full of large numbers of students who may come from families who don't speak English or broken, dysfunctional, or low-income homes. Many of them don't have the resources that many more fortunate students may have. So what do you do when your only resource of help gives up on you? You give up on education. There are so many hurdles in the way of minority students. Either they don't have the resources that they need, or even if they do, there is a greater fear of not fitting in an all-white class than receiving a better education. And even if they do jump over that last hurdle, prejudice and racism is still an issue that pushes back the finish line further and further. A Hispanic junior I interviewed told me they would jokingly call me a beaner, and they thought it was okay because I was different from the other ones. So what do? We start from the beginning. We start all the way back in kindergarten because starting in high school is trying to help people who have already been failed by the education system. The National Education Association states these strategies as successful in closing the achievement gap. We make school a place where every student can receive the resources that they need regardless of their limitations. I know a girl who began the school year failing until she started to stay after school every day for almost 2 hours just so she could have a quiet place to do her homework. And eventually she began to pass. Support students in every aspect. Embrace and consider students' diversity to be an asset, and make teachers more culturally understanding. And this doesn't just end with teachers and the administration. Students can help their own situations also. Just because I have subjected you to a TED Talk full of statistics and facts about how Black and Hispanic students don't take higher level classes doesn't mean that has to remain the stereotype. We are the students in these statistics, so why don't we just change the numbers? I implore you to break out of this stereotype. Don't let discouragement stop you. When you choose your classes, ask about every single option that is available to you. Be in the driver's seat of your own education. And yes, I know this is all sappy, but every single cheesy poster I've ever seen in any of my teachers' classrooms has always said, children are the future. So why aren't we investing in our futures? Can we close this gap, or will this remain to be a systematic problem that people remain oblivious to? Thank you.